Good evening. Welcome to our crowd tonight. We're going to start our caucus meeting agenda with the oath of office, and I would like to call on Chief Wren.
Thank you, Mayor Abishon, members of council. I'd like to approach the podium, if you approve. So tonight, we're very fortunate to recognize some members of our department. And to start with, firefighter Rob Barth. Would you come up front? Firefighter Rob Barth is a lieutenant EMT with the department. And Rob began his career, Lieutenant Rob, began his career with the City of Florence on August 6th, 2007. Firefighter Matt Kraft. I know he's here, I saw him, there he is. Firefighter Matt Kraft is a lieutenant EMT with the department. Matt began his career with the City of Florence on December 23rd, 2019. Firefighter Vince Lanning. Vince is a lieutenant paramedic with the department, and Vince began his career with the City of Florence on July 6th, 2015. Brandon McHugh. Brandon is a lieutenant EMT and began his career with the City of Florence on September 26, 2016. Firefighter Candace Stewart. Candace is a lieutenant paramedic and began her career with Florence on August 10, 2020. Firefighter Josh Tucker. I seen Josh. There's Josh. Josh is a lieutenant EMT with the department, and he began his career on February 24th, 2020.
Do you want me to do everyone, or do you want it separate? Congratulations. We're going to do our official swearing in, so if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Kentucky so long as you remain a citizen thereof, and that you will faithfully execute to the best of your ability the office of Lieutenant of the Florence Fire and EMS Department according to law? And do you further solemnly swear that since the adoption of the present Constitution, that you, being a citizen of this state, have not fought a duel within this state nor out of it, nor have you sent or accepted a challenge to fight a duel with deadly weapons, nor have you acted as a second in carrying a challenge, nor aided or assisted any person thus offending, so help you God? Congratulations. And now you must sign your oaths. So Melissa will get those. I think they're right behind you.
Put yourselves in alphabetical.
From this way, left to right. There we go.
There's an extra one right here. Who's that belong to? Is that you? Congratulations, everybody.
Congratulations. Just the one.
Two signatures. One oath and then the paper behind. Pass them this way, too. Thank you.
Take one.
Congratulations, guys. And as traditional, if anyone would like to pin these individuals, family members, whoever, please feel free to do so. These men and women are the future of the department.
Thank you all, and thanks to your families for sharing you with us as part of our family here at the City of Florence. We appreciate all of our firemen and women who have come out here to support as well tonight, so thank you all. And next item is discussion by Todd Morgan, Director of Community Development, about a consideration of Resolution R-25-001A of the Boone County Planning Commission recommending approval with conditions for request of Brew Team Kentucky LLC per Brian Evans applicant for George and Beverly Rawlings owner for a zoning map amendment from Suburban Residential 1 SR1 and Office 202 to Commercial Services 3 for an approximate 1.5 acre site located at 8109 to 8113 US 42. 2, a change of concept development plan for an approximate 0.3 acre portion of the approximate 1.5 acre lot located at 8109 to 8113 US 42. And 3, a variance reducing the buffer yard A width along the easternmost boundary from 10 feet to 3 feet. This request is for a zone change, a change of concept development plan, and a variance for the approximate 1.5 acre property located 8109 to 8113 US 42, Florence, Kentucky. Is providing the recommendation forwarded by to the City of Florence, Kentucky from the Planning Commission. This was reviewed by our City of Florence Planning and Zoning Committee. And Mr. Morgan, if you could proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. On screen, I have the site vicinity map. We're looking at a 1.56 acre site. It has frontage on 42 and La Cresta Drive. Of course, this is the Rawlings Foundation buildings. I think one's the Rawlings Foundation, one's the Rawlings Company. Both of these would be demolished and a 7 Brew Coffee would be developed in its place. Again, the proposal is to rezone the land from SR1, which is Suburban Residential 1, and Office 2 to Commercial Services to allow 7 Brew Coffee. This is the current zoning of the property. You can see the office buildings are zoned Office 2. The land behind White Castle is zoned SR1. So again, all of that would be rezoned to Commercial Services to allow 7 Brew Coffee. This is the concept plan that was submitted with the application. It shows a 538 square foot building. That's the primary building. There is also a 238 square foot cooler and storage building. They all tie together. As far as access, it will be full ingress, so cars could turn in left in here, also right turn in. So this is your ingress point. This would be a channelized right out only. And there's also a southern driveway that goes out. So the Planning Commission actually conditioned this driveway. It has to be a 14-foot one-way out only, and that would allow customers to come up to the light and turn left if they were going westward and away from the interstate. As far as the drive-through lanes, you can see there's 2 of them. 24 cars can stack in these lanes. And workers greet you with iPads. There are new menu boards on site. As far as some other features I'd like to point out, there is the full buffer yards on the rear. These are code compliant. So this is 30-foot wide with a fence in this area. And then it goes up to 60 feet wide with a lot of landscaping required. So again, the buffer yard up against the residential area is compliant. There's also this underground detention vault. So most of the stormwater would go here, and of course, it would be released in this area, slower release to address stormwater impacts. The Planning Commission also analyzed 2 variances. The first one was right here. It was to reduce that buffer down from 10 feet to 3 up against White Castle, and that was needed just because you can see the width of the driveway. The other variance was withdrawn. It was to reduce this driveway aisle down from 20 feet to 16. I actually recommended that be withdrawn, and the reason being these parking spaces were able to be reduced, and that driveway aisle was able to be made 20 feet wide. Excuse me. So this is a view of what a 7 Brew coffee looks like. This is one in Arkansas, so ours in Florence would look very similar to this. This was a sample board they submitted for this store. Again, it correlates back to the one in Arkansas I just showed you, as far as the brick, the metal, and also the ephes. As far as the dumpster enclosure and cooler building, those would all match with that same Nietzsche brick. Would like to point out, as far as a little bit of site history, back in '84, there was a zoning map amendment to allow the Rawlings Foundation buildings to be rezoned to Office 2. That's what the change of concept plan is about. As far as site topography, you can see stormwater does drain towards the residential area, so it's 900 feet above sea level where my pointer's at, 890. But again, that water would be captured by that new underground detention vault. Aerial map of the site, so you can see the 2 buildings that would be torn down. The new southern driveway would come out right where this notch is at in the property, where my pointer's at. And again, the area along the southern property line would be landscaped with either a 30-foot wide or 60-foot buffer. Some views of the property. So again, these are the 2 existing office buildings that would be torn down. Of course, the adjoining properties, most of them are zoned commercial services, so Tire Discounters to the north, C3. White Castle, C3. O'Reilly's is also C3. This is a view of the access point on La Cresta. So you can see, of course, see the signal in the distance. There was a Planning Commission condition that this sidewalk would be extended down the full length of the subject property. This is a view the other way on La Cresta. This is Jamison right here. So there's a little bit of an offset intersection here. I did ask the city engineer about that, and they did not have any concerns about that. So that is in your staff report, that correspondence. This is the rear property line, so this is up against the residential area. Again, the buffer would be enhanced. For reference, you can see the White Castle sign. Also a view looking towards White Castle and looking towards O'Reilly's. And again, you can see some of the residential fences. As far as the comprehensive plan, it forecasts a majority of the site for commercial uses, a smaller area for residential. I would like to point out and stress that this is not supposed to be an exact. It's subject to refinement and interpretation by not only the Planning Commission, but also the legislative body. And also like to remind everyone that a 30 to 60 foot wide landscaping buffer will be going on that rear property line. These comments were made during the public hearing. There was questions about public notice. Of course, Mr. Costello from the Planning Commission explained that. There was talks about a blind spot on La Cresta not being suited for access, and there's issues with stormwater. And again, I believe most of those, especially the stormwater one, has been addressed, and I really don't see the blind spot. The Planning Commission voted to approve this 12-1. I'm just going to read over two of these conditions. The first one is that access in the southern portion of the lot was only allowed to be a egress point 14 feet wide. And that easternmost curb cut needs to be channelized to channelize traffic towards the interstate, and only right-hand turning movements could be made. And the variance would only be approved if the city takes final action. And the reason that's on there is the Planning Commission takes final actions on variances. Of course, the P&Z committee met last week, and again, we added 7 additional conditions, which I'm going to leave on screen. I'm just going to highlight 2 of those. The first one, the city engineer shall review the location and orientation of the underground detention outflow pipe and associated riprap and channel liner to mitigate stormwater impacts on the adjoining property owners to the south. We also, once again, noted that this chain is drive-through only, and there is no serving of food. So it's basically, that condition reads that if the restaurant were ever to change from beverage sales only to food and beverage sales, it would have to be reevaluated through a change of concept plan process. And of course, that would be Planning Commission recommendation to council. And we would want to look at the traffic cues and basically traffic as a whole. So I will leave the concept plan. That pretty much concludes my presentation. If there's any questions on this, I'll be glad to take them.
Are there any questions? Leslie?
I'm reading through here and it says something, 101.27 average. Is this cars that would be going to this business likely during their peak hours during the morning?
I am actually going to bring up the applicant to address the traffic. I told him to be prepared to address the questions or worries about the traffic study.
I had a flat tire on the way up.
Oh.
So, I'm Brian Evans with Seven Brew. Good afternoon.
Welcome.
Could you repeat your question, please?
I was just looking and it says 101.27 as the average rate for the vehicle trip generation. So is this telling us what to expect for however many cars will be going through there and during peak hours?
So on a peak hour, looking at I looked at 10 locations. Our peak hour tends to be 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., kind of dependent on the location. And we see about 79 to 80 vehicles on average in that peak hour in the morning. The traffic study, so we started this process last summer, had discussions with KYTC as well as the city, and came to the conclusion that we were going to do a study based on the ITE trip generation manual. KYTC looked at it, the city engineer looked at it, neither saw any negligible impacts on the traffic system.
So, Josh, can you tell me maybe another business that gets that same type of volume?
I guess, first thing, we're not seeing that 100 number that you're describing. We've got it at 52.
So this was in the staff report on page 6, so this would be Exhibit A.
Yeah, it's like 2 pages past that, so.
Yeah.
But I mean, even on that one that says 52, the next column says 96. I'm just trying to get an idea of how busy this business is expected to be. And maybe I'm not very good at picturing these number of cars, but maybe you could tell me a place that maybe gets similar traffic.
Read into the record what
So
it
this is,
states.
so this is what the staff report Trip generation for the proposed use will generate 52 AM peak hour trips and 22 PM peak hour trips.
So, I mean, when we look at these, we don't look at how it compares to other businesses. We do, but we don't. So I don't know how to give you an answer of what other light business generates that much traffic. We look at the existing road conditions. Specifically, we dialed in on La Cresta. We know that most of the traffic movements are going to be towards 75. As people leave their house, they're going to get coffee and turn right and go out. The biggest thing that we dialed in on was how would it impact La Cresta. We had VOX evaluated, and they felt during the peak periods, it was between 2 and 3 cars per traffic signal timing as it transitioned that would be at that light, at worst case scenario. So it wouldn't create excessive stacking on La Cresta. And then the other thing that we look at is the stacking standards to make sure that you're not stacking out and impeding traffic on US 42. So we analyzed all that, had VOX verify it, and they confirmed that it does not do either of those.
Yeah, and the last thing I had them evaluate was that Austin intersection with Jameson, and made sure they felt that was safe, and that's in that email as well. They looked at that and did not see that as a concern.
And fortunately, the CarMax project, you remember voting on that last year. VOX did the traffic study on that, so they compared the growth projections and the amount of semis going in and out and vehicle traffic from that study and compared it with this traffic, and it all checked out. So we did not just take existing conditions, we looked at future conditions as well.
Diane, did you have a question, comment?
Well, I think Josh addressed part of that. Tom Zerlinski, one of the commission members, did ask that question about CarMax, and Kevin Costello said that he would check on that to find out what the status was, other than the fact that the hotel had been torn down. And so when you do look at the conflicting traffic,
Sure.
the trucks coming off of Jameson, the cars coming out there, what does that potentially do to the residential traffic on La Cresta?
It's a good point. So when we did analyze it, the one thing that we asked VOX to do was take a look at what they projected for CarMax. The good thing about this use category in CarMax is they offset. They have different peak periods, right? So most of the time in the morning, that's going to be your busiest time for a coffee shop. It's going to be more afternoon for a car dealership. And car dealerships by nature, especially ones that don't have a big mechanic shop, they're not high turnover uses. The biggest thing you have to deal with there is the amount of semis that are dropping cars and picking them up and hauling them out. And from memory, and I think it's analyzed in here, it was 2 per day, 2 to 3 per day. And there's no real way to project what time those go through. It's kind of when they get here and where they're coming from. But VOX did evaluate that because they did the traffic study for CarMax.
Yeah, it says 2 to 3.
Yep.
Any other questions? I encourage you, if you do have any questions between now and next week, to reach out to Todd or Josh.